Matt Cowell, welcome to the Graft Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and see us. We've been talking for a long time, right? And this is a subject today that is something I've really wanted to dig into for a long time, because I think it's a massive unknown challenge for a lot of people, unfortunately, not so much for yourself. But today we're talking about gambling and gambling addiction. Matt, you've had a lot of experience in that space. You mentioned to me 25 years of being a gambling addict. If we can start with your story, where did that begin?
Sure, yeah. Firstly, thanks for having me. Thanks for the warm welcome. Sadly, been a gambling addict for over a quarter of a century, 25 years. Started innocently, but at a young age. My earliest memory of it was I'd see my dad playing fruit machines at a motorway service station, like when we were out for the day. I would cut up the jockeys' jerseys for the Grand National Sweepstake at home. This was when I was probably 10 or 11. It was very innocent. No gambling history in the family, parents non-gamblers. And I started to get interested in it when I was about early teens. And my first memory of kind of being quote unquote out of control was we went on a family holiday down to Newquay, and I'd saved up about 50, 60 pounds of my paper round money at that time to go down there. And there was a games room in the hotel that we stayed in. And I was kind of just old enough to take some time away from my parents to go and have an explore around the hotel. And there was a Simpsons fruit machine in there that I was just completely and utterly mesmerised by the lights and just the way it worked, and started slowly but surely putting my money in there that I'd brought with me for kind of spending money. And then I remember looking for ways to engineer to get away from my parents so I could go in there and say, I'm just going to go and see if anyone's playing table tennis, and just shoveling money into this fruit machine. I remember specifically going to the bar to get a £10 note changed. And the barman, who, to be honest, probably should have intervened because I was clearly too young to be playing the thing, gave me pound coins. And I remember just thinking, this money's not coming back now. I'm putting it in and it's entertaining me in the short term, but I'm actually spending money here. And I started to kind of compute that. And I never forget, a couple of days later, we went for a walk down Newquay Pier, and I saw a T-shirt that I wanted to buy in a surf shop. And my mum said, well, buy it if you want. You know, you brought your money with you. What'd you bring it for? Otherwise, you saved up some money to come here. And I remember specifically thinking to myself, no, what I've done is wrong here. I've lost this money. No one can know about this. Like a feeling of shame even at that point. And then kind of had to sort of almost throw her off the scent. Like, no, there'll be a better one down the road. Like, I don't like it that much. And try not to be too convincing, but at the same time to kind of sort of almost like manipulate emotions and deflect a little bit even at that young age. And she didn't buy it and took my wallet off me and saw that there was £2.56 or something in there out of this 50, 60 quid that I've had, and asked me where it had gone. And I just sort of said, I've just been playing the machine in the hotel. And, you know, I got told off for it, probably in hindsight, not as severely as maybe I should have done. That might have changed the trajectory a bit for me, but it was just a perfect storm for my kind of excitement, and then that dovetailed later on into sport, and as I got older, betting in casinos, football matches, and it just escalated very, very quickly after that, really.
Wow. Oh, I mean, you're talking there, interestingly, Matt, about something that's triggered a memory of mine, actually, that I've not thought about for ages. But my family's Dutch. We went from we would go from Hull to the Hook of Holland on a boat, and there'd be fruit machines on there. And actually, once me and my stepbrother, I think we had like 50 pence or something, and we went on a fruit machine. But we won the jackpot. It was 62 quid, and because I remember going back to the cabin and saying to my dad and my stepmom, was like, you won't believe how much we've won. And they were like, oh, how much have we won? £5, £10. We're like, we've won 62 quid. And my parents being like, holy shit. That's when I was 40 years ago. Right. And how much of an enormous amount of money it was. When you were describing to me then about you going on that fruit machine, it was that that feeling, it's exciting. It was enticing. I think you used that word as well. Is that, at that age, I could understand how that would kind of capture someone's feelings and emotions really, really quickly. But you said already there that you'd noticed that you then had to almost do a behavioural change to lie about what had happened and create that. At what age were you when you started to really notice got a problem, and to what extent was it a problem?
I think to an extent from that day, I knew that I was a bit out of control, even though I wouldn't have articulated it like that in my young mind. Like the pull of the machine and the Simpsons, the Homer Simpson like burping sounds that it made and things. I was a Simpsons fan. It was it's a very enticing, like you said. I remember joining a gym when I was 16, and about age 17, I was the youngest in my school year, but some of my mates were driving, and they would come and pick me up, and I'd tell my mum that we were going to the gym, but we weren't. We were going to the motorway service station to play the fruit machines. And I remember I would come in sometimes, shoot straight upstairs like I needed a toilet, and then run my towel in the basin of the sink to make it seem like it was wet, so like I'd had a shower there, and consistent with kind of gym behaviour. When we'd just been down to the motorway services on the M3 playing the over 18 fruit machines, which no one would police because it's kind of just like an open plan. We're talking 16, 17 here. And then I remember specifically, not days, but weeks after my 18th birthday, I was a few grand in debt.
Wow.
Through paying the roulette machines, what's known as the FOBTs, the fixed odds betting terminals, which are still in the bookmakers now, but they're more regulated as of about 8 years ago than they were back then. You used to be able to do £100 every 20 seconds back then before they moved the guidelines. And I wasn't necessarily doing those sums, but I was doing most of my wages for my full-time job that I was at when I was 18. And then this was probably 2003, 2004-ish, when it was a lot easier to get credit. So it was a given to get an overdraft or a credit card kind of on your 18th birthday. And I just always had this rationale in my mind that I could gamble myself out of it, in a sense that if I just dipped 50 quid into the overdraft, it was no big deal because there was a win round the corner. And if that 50 became 500, it didn't really matter because it was still part of the plan. And if that went to 1500, it was all right because I'm only 7 days away from payday. And there was always just kind of this chain of almost like this death by 1,000 cuts of just kind of moving backwards as I got older. Yeah, and got to grips with me very early.
When you won, Matt, right? Because I mean, you talk about gambling addiction, but at the same time, people who have gambling addictions do win, right? I mean, it's not like you're bad at it, as right? It's maybe you can just explain for people who are listening is that it's one of the things that I've always been surprised about, but interestingly, I probably see it in my own behaviour. Footballers, for example, I've got a family friend whose brother-in-law was a professional footballer. He played for Man United when he was younger, and he would talk about how when they're not training, they either buy cars, they on computers, or they go gambling. Now, we'll come back to it in a bit because I want to talk about it a bit more. The interesting thing, the reason why he'd go gambling, is because you can't be really visibly seen to be in trouble there. Mm-hmm. He's not pissed. He's not out shagging. So there's someone selling a story. He's away behind closed doors and they're gambling. But I always used to ask, it was like, well, how much do you need to win? So when you've seen about like some of the higher profile footballers who have lost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, an enormous amount of money, it's almost like, but how much did you need to win to not do it? I guess my question is like, could you ever be satisfied?
No, I think there's probably two things there. A problem gambler is not going to experience the same joy of winning as maybe a non-problem gambler. There's definitely, I think, a relativity that the addiction has almost kind of corrupted that. So you're not going to get the feeling that you think you're going to get. It's not fundamentally, I don't believe gambling addiction is that much about money as maybe people who didn't understand it as much would think. It's about the playing just to play. It's in the neurochemistry of the placing the bet, in the excitement, that kind of thing. So essentially, all the time you're in that paradigm, you're not going to be able to win that game, because it's just kind of like, I want to play. And then it's, well, I'm getting a diminishing return on only playing with 50 quid. I want to play with 500 quid. I'm getting a diminishing return from that. I want to play with 5,000. So it's kind of like to just satisfy the mind.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I think what you said about could you ever win enough? The goalposts just always move. They just will always move. There's always the number of times I've been on my hands and knees in my bedroom, if we could just win 1,200 quid, I'll pay so-and-so back. It will sort that out. It will make sure the direct debits go through. If we could, Lord, if we can just get this one over the line, win the 1,200 quid. And it's like, forgotten all about that conversation. It's kind of, where can I go? What can I do? Oh, Man City, you're definitely going to win. So let's do that. And you just, it's fundamentally a game you can't win.
And that's quite a male behaviour I've been reading about as well, which is interesting, Matt. And I know that the numbers of addicts with males versus females is massively weighted towards males, but it also the act of gambling is also very much so as well. But interestingly, and I can't remember the exact terminology, blokes even in general, I think. So, me and my friends are going away for a lad's weekend away in 2 weeks. We will talk so much about it leading up to it, probably more so than we ever will the actual going away for the weekend.
It's almost better than the actual going.
And that's what I think blokes do that a lot. When we're going out for a few beers with the lads, brilliant, I'm so excited. You get home, how was it? Yeah, it was all right.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I can see that with gambling. I can see the almost like, I could, but then the actual act of actually winning, per se, I'd be like, you could almost move on quickly.
Yeah, I suppose it's almost like a relativity in the mind. A bit like if someone says, you've got to go and see this movie, it's the best movie you'll ever see, and they say it's 11 out of 10, inherently it won't live up to your expectations. It's kind of I completely agree with what you said. I think the best part of a holiday is almost like the countdown to the holiday. Yeah. It's because like when you get there, it's like wherever you go, there you are. It's just me on holiday now, and it's almost like you can kind of jazz that up. You can ramp that up, whether it's the serotonin or it's the dopamine. It's something in the mind that kind of, it's the unlimited possibilities. It's the kind of, you can almost try to future pace how I'm going to feel when I win. At the same time, I'm incredibly excited now. So it's like, oh my God, this is just the best thing ever. I'm thrilled now. And when I win, if I win that, I can do this and I could do that. And it's, there's only a certain amount of stimulus that I think you can actually feel in the mind in real time, versus to pace it forward is almost indefinite. And you're kind of almost wanting to do that cycle. And that's the thing, like, it's just the some of the times I've been most disappointed when I've lost is not because I no longer have the money. It's because I can't, but there's a game on in the evening and I will not be on it. So I've now got it's 4:00 and I've got to wait. I'm waiting till 7:45 and this game's going to come and go tonight, and I might be watching it on the telly and I've got no money on it. I'm more annoyed about that than the money that I've just lost and what that does to my current situation.
Wow. Okay.
It's strange.
Anyways. How bad did it get, Matt? How much did it escalate?
Incredibly bad. I'll give you some nuts and bolts. I was at age 25. I was declared bankrupt with £68,000 of unsecured debt, which was solely down to gambling. So I had nothing to show for that, and I'd gambled a large extent of all my salary away. Started working for a bank age 18 up until that point. They asked me to leave, which was on the fence for misconduct, because I was getting paid into my account that wasn't with the bank I worked at, and I would write a cheque from that account into my staff account, because as being a staff member, you could withdraw against a cheque before it had actually cleared, and then I would spend the money and then write a cheque to a different account and then use that to pay that one, and essentially playing the bank at their own game, just cycling the money round. It's known as cross-firing, which isn't necessarily illegal. and they suspended me over Christmas in 2008. And I would have kept my job, but I gambled again week before Christmas. So despite the fact that I was off, this was 2008, 2009 time. And then that led to the bankruptcy. I didn't gamble for 3 3/4 years between February 2009 and 1st of January 2013. And it's been a struggle of relapse kind of cycles off and on since then, several years of not gambling. I'm currently 508 days off, and a lot of that was I've done a lot of introspective work about recovery. I went into rehab, Gordon Moody rehab last year. That was fantastic for 8 days in there. So yeah, I've been wanting and trying hard to quit for a long time. Sounds like old adage, but it feels different this time. It definitely feels different where I'm at with what I'm doing now.
Congrats on 508 days.
Thank you.
Right, and
Thank you very much.
that is, I can appreciate, not an easy thing in any way, shape or form, but great that you're at 508.
Thanks.
How much did your family and friends know about it?
So growing up, I tried to hide it from my parents. When I was suspended from my job at the bank, I would put my suit on every day and go out like as if I was working, and I would drive to High Street 10 minutes from me, sometimes gambling, sometimes not. And yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot of shame in it and an awful lot of, I don't know, I feel like probably now a regret is I wasn't more open and honest with my parents. I had almost cat and mouse games with my mum, who knew that I wasn't particularly well, but wasn't necessarily in a position, I think, to understand it and maybe help where I was at. I remember once I went to bed and woke up in the night not feeling very well. This must have been early 20s. And woke up with sort of a bit of a fever and making sort of groaning noises. My mum came in, sort of, "You're right, what's the matter? Like, sit yourself up," and sort of propped me up, and nearly $3.5 grand cash fell out of my pillowcase onto the floor, where I would always used to keep it under there and kind of like almost sort of sleep on the cash that I had, like, just, if anyone wants this, they're coming through me, I'm not trusting it being anywhere else. And yeah, I mean, I probably should have had a bit more of a steer into, but then again, it's easy to blame others. I wasn't ready to quit. I wasn't in the right world in my 20s, I don't think. I flirted with Gamblers Anonymous late 20s, and somewhere between not fully being ready to accept I had a problem and thinking that anything could actually help, mustered through sort of my late 20s, early 30s, not necessarily taking recovery particularly seriously. And I think, it's a classic cliche in the addiction world, but there is a big difference between abstinence and recovery. I recover now as a compulsive gambler, and there's certain things I do with my recovery now and will do to the day I die, versus just, can I just get through to the weekend without a bet? Abstaining and not necessarily accepting that I actually do have a problem. Life becomes unmanageable when I do gamble. It's not something that I can do in moderation and won't be in this lifetime. It's a bit of a difference there.
Yeah.
I think I've gained more clarity and understanding around that, I think.
This is still very much a work in progress. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
The reason this is so important to me and I wanted to learn more about it, Matt, was I shared with you before, right? And I want to share with people who are listening just about what I think is just the size of this growing issue without question. So I have a group of friends. There's 5 of us. We go to football together. We have a syndicate group message called the Betting Disasters. Ironically, we never win. I think actually we won twice in 3 years, and we each pick a football team at the weekend. The 6 of us. We then put that on as an accumulator, each of us, and you can bet as much as you want. I would bet £10 a week on that. In my mind, there's 40 weeks of the year playing football. It's £400, £500 a year. It's no big deal. But I started to play slot machines and live slot machines and on betting apps. They all now are massively invested in casino and casino online. So I would play periodically slot machines. There's one called the Big Bass Fish and Catcher, whatever it is, and there'll be 7 different versions of that, so on and so forth. And I would go on there when sat in an airport lounge waiting to fly somewhere with work, doom scrolling whilst watching football on the TV at night time, and so on and so forth. And I clicked on my Sky Bet app 3-4 months ago when I first got in touch with yourself, and over the course of 12 months, it will give you a profit and loss analysis. And over the course of 12 months, I'd actually won £909.43. So I'm up. I'm winning. I'm positive, right? But in that time, I am ashamed to say, not ashamed. I was number one, I was massively surprised. Secondly, I was mortified. In that time, I'd gambled nearly £21,000 over 12 months. A friend of mine was equally as alarmed as I was, and then looked at his, and he had also won about £400 over 12 months, but he'd bet nearly £19,000 as well. Now, I just want to reconfirm that I had not lost money then. So just for those who are listening, I have bet £21,000, but I've won 21,900. So I'm technically up. But that is a staggering amount of money, and certainly not money that I could willingly go, yeah, I'm going to gamble 20 grand this year. I just had no concept at all of 3 things. 1, if I was winning. 2, if I was losing. 3, how much I'd bet. And I think the reason I wanted to do this episode more than ever is so that people can be really aware of how big this is in so many different areas. And the reasons are, I think, are pretty simple. If you're an alcoholic or somebody thinks you've got a drinking problem and they see you, and Matt, we're friends, and I think you've got a bit of a problem with drink, and I see you and you smell of booze, I'd put an arm around you and say, hey, how can I help? If it was drugs and you were doing coke and I'd see you being a bit fidgety for whatever reason, I'd go, have you had a little dabble, sort of thing? It'd be evident, is what I'm saying. This isn't evident to anybody. No one. I didn't have a clue that I'd done that. My wife had no idea at all, and none of my friends would ever see it at all, because I can do it wherever I want, whenever I want, as frequently as I want to as well. And so it made me really dig in, not to rant on about it too much, but I wanted to just dig in to give people a little bit of view of the size of gambling, casinos, betting companies in the UK. It's a £16.8 billion industry per year, which last year grew nearly 8% year on year. The UK is the biggest in Europe. Online, which is made up of casino betting and online slot machines, is now nearly between 45 and 50% of all gambling in the UK. 48% of adults gamble each month, and worryingly, whilst we look at 50% of that value is done online, there are 5,800 betting shops on the UK high street.
Wow, that many. Gosh.
There are more betting shops on the high street than Tesco, Sainsbury's and Morrisons combined.
Is that so? Wow, that's a good stat.
Which is, and everyone goes, that can't be right. It's like, well, I'm in a small town. There's 2.
I can believe that. Yeah. And they're often clustered together as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what I find really surprising about it, though, Matt, when I heard those things, was it's something, as I say, that is so people are so blissfully unaware of that, how quickly you can go into a gaming machine and put £20 in and do £2 spins. You can put it on autoplay.
Yeah. You
don't even need to touch it. I've seen people in pubs put £20 in and carry on chatting. They're not even having a conversation. Yeah. So the kind of, greasy-haired guy with a blue pen in his mouth, chewing, looking at a TV screen, watching dogs in Romford isn't what it's about. This is really getting into people that I think have never been aware of gambling before, and I think it's something that's dramatically increasing, and evidently so. How worried are you about it in terms of for others? I look at my son, that 18 to 25-year-old, and you know, they're scrolling on phones all day, every day. There's got to be some smart programs out there going, this is untapped. We now need to filter some ads. That's got to be happening.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that worries me about it. Since I started sharing my journey on social media, I get 15 messages a day, no exaggeration at least, from anywhere between 16 and 24-year-olds. Every time I'm walking down the high street and I see a group of teenagers together, I think to myself, one of those is a problem gambler and the rest of them don't know. So they all go into the betting shop together to do 20 quid, and then one of them gets out on the phone, it's right up to his neck in it, doesn't want to tell them because of the shame. And that's, like you say, the availability of it is off the charts. You've got everything from the clustered betting shops in the lower economic areas, if we're honest, that's where they target. You've got AI tools using your pattern of when you deposit and when you withdraw, so when they're most likely to target you with a free bet, things like that. You've got complex algorithms looking at the time of day, month, year that you play, advertising in your face at strategic times. And like you say, it is essentially I call it the invisible addiction, because most problem gamblers, myself included, you very quickly develop an innate way of kind of covering it up. You go to the toilet and do it. I do personal trainer by trade. I've had my clients warming up when I've been spinning on William Hill roulette, pretending that I'm making notes on their session. £95 a spin, every 4 or 5 seconds, that kind of thing. And no one really knows, because we're all on our phones doing something, like you say, airport lounge, train, whatever, doom scrolling in the evening, dovetailing into slightly different other topics, but it's a lot of loneliness and male isolation and that kind of thing, where people maybe live on their own, no partner, Uber Eats for dinner, bit of telly on, and you sit, and it's a pastime that can escalate so quickly. Right.
So I want to pick up on that bit that you talked about, because scarily further researching on is that, so that loneliness aspect that you talk about, one of the biggest pieces that their online gambling companies are investing in is how quickly they can make it the most realistic environment that people are involved in, but actually just sat at home on a phone. So almost giving people a sense of a community, that they're socialising, that they're not on their own.
No,
but
could
the
be
driver,
a virtual croupier or something like that that's talking to you. Or
Yeah. So almost, and investing in that element to make AIs helping in that element, because it makes that virtual croupier seem so real that they're asking, and Ben, nice to see you again. How did it go down in Thatcham today?
Yeah.
It's that's so scary. How is this scary. Being so, without getting on my soapbox too much about it though, Matt, but because when I looked at this weekend, I wanted to really specifically look into it between Friday and Sunday evening, and to give context, in the car for a couple of hours, went to the pub for some drinks on Saturday, dinner out Saturday night, watched the live football on Sunday, listened to the radio whilst driving around the car. I heard 48 different ads for gambling. So much so now that even when they read the halftime scores out on football, they then give you the odds for the other team to come back and win.
Yeah,
that didn't exist before. That literally did not exist. So now the Talk Sports radio channel have their choral correspondent come on and giving. I'm surprised. I'm really worried about how big this is going to become. When you see that level of advertising and you see the level of how much it's moving into a digital world, this has a real... It feels almost underground now.
It's so worrying. I regularly say I think it'll be the biggest problem in society in the next 1 to 2 years. I think everything you just said there is true. I think there was a rugby match recently. It was within the last month that it was the first ever picture-in-picture. So there was a Samsung advert that came on while the rugby was on. So like the rugby was minimised and then the Samsung advert came on. It was one of the first. So you're still watching the game. They're scrumming, playing away, but then there's a advert here. How long before that's a gambling thing?
100%.
In probably weeks, not months. And then that's just going to just fuel things exponentially. When I was young, when I was 18, if I wanted to gamble, I would have to get in my 1.1 Fiesta, drive down to Coral in Farnborough, take a little blue biro out, write out on the slip that I wanted to bet on the number of corners that was in the match, take it up to the lady.
Stinker smoke.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Smoke.
Get her to look at it and be like, what's this? Do we do betting on that? And so, yeah, we do. You do. If you just press it, I would show her how to do it on the screen. And she'd be like, okay. Then I'd put my slip in my back pocket and make sure I didn't lose it. Now you can skip to the toilet at a wedding and bet on how many shots on target there's going to be in the first half of the Man United game. How many saves will the away goalkeeper make? What colour suits Donald Trump going to wear next time he's in the White House? How long's Leonardo DiCaprio going to take to walk up to the stage to get his Grammy? Will it be under or over 48 seconds? You can bet on absolutely everything. And it's this gamified world that I don't know where it ends, because you even go to Black Friday now, a hair care company will innocently say, spin the wheel and see if we give you 12 or 17% off your thing. Do you know what I mean? But it's the conditioning into that kind of world, and they're not necessarily sinister at it.
No.
But Tesco, Sainsbury's give you 20 extra nectar points if you do this funny little game while you're at the... And the youth of today, I mean...
And they're incentivised within it as well, though, Matt. Like, so gambling apps on Saturdays will normally have Bruno Fernandes to take a free kick.
Yeah.
Evens. You can't bet more than 10 quid. Okay, so there's a temper on it, right?
Yeah.
But that's going to happen. And so you'll win, and so you'll win 20 quid.
Yeah.
The stats are that you then go on to lose more.
Mm.
So if you lost that money, the betting companies are almost like, fuck, they won't carry on betting now. Whereas if they win, they know they're going to get more money back. If that was a pub, that's the same as standing outside and saying, do you want a free shot, mate? And you can come in then after that. Knowing that you're going to come in and blitz it. You wouldn't be allowed to do that with alcohol. You wouldn't be able to allow to do that because there's for someone who's an alcoholic or struggling, that's too... How is this seems... to me, it seems lawless.
It's like you say, the conditioning is in the win as well, because of course he's going to get a free kick. They won't just say, here's a £50 free bet. They'll say, if Arsenal win a corner in this match, you have. So, it feels like you've got a little barrier for entry, even though it will 100% happen. So, but it's that kind of, I was right about that.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of that thing. And that's it's very hard to not be conspiracy theorist about it in some ways. But then it's the world we live in. And, people way smarter than us, no disrespect, have sat round a table to think about, why don't we have clocks in casinos? Because people will lose their bearings if they don't know what the time is. Why don't we have rigid corners? Because if it all just blurs into one, people will, continue to walk round. Why are the chips a certain colour? Why is this a certain colour? It's all really to activate certain survival instincts, cognitive biases in the brain and things like that. The chips seem a hell of a lot more expendable. If every time when you won, the guy was 20, 40, 60, 80, you think, that's my lot. When there's these chips, it's more easy. So, and that's just on steroids now with AI.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like your pattern of betting, you don't stand a chance against a machine that is trying to extract money from you, really.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned before when you were younger, it was the Simpsons fruit machine.
Yeah.
That's what they all are on the slots, right? It's old. It's the Goonies.
Nostalgic films or things.
Ace Ventura. Absolutely right. They're and that for me is kind of who's getting their hands around this. I did read a report about how there's, I'll be careful how I word it, but there's somebody who's got an enormous amount of wealth from running a gambling company, an enormous UK taxpayer, right? And the advising against investing in other rings because it draws attention to the cost and the money that they're making in the gaming world. I mean, that's almost then sinister,
I think I might
right?
know who you're talking about. Yeah,
that's like we're making keep it down, and I can't see where it stops. It's only going to get more interpretive with AI. It's only going to become more targeted towards, we know when you sit down on the toilet and start doom scrolling, right? Yeah. My son, on the loo, 40 minutes a day. And it's, I'm like, and it's scrolling on whatever, but that's going to become targeted.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, phones are a whole entire conversation of their own, the way we look at short form clips, cheap dopamine, the enjoyment's just in that next reel, not quite yet. The next one's the one that's going to do it for me, and again, the conditioned mind of someone that's very isolated, very used to a mechanical device. And then you throw into the fact that, I have people reach out to me that actually think that gambling is a means that they can make money from. And to me, that's laughable with someone with the discipline of me and the compulsive nature. But you also see these clips of these, whether it's celebrities, rappers, things that are winning. And then you find out it's all endorsed by stake.com, BetMGM, things like that, so it's fueling that idea, because there are a part of the compulsive addict in me that struggled for so long, because it almost makes rational sense that it's the only addiction that you can almost inherently fix yourself through by continuing to play. If I lose 9 bets in a row, my brain is saying to me, we know you've got a problem here, but for Christ's sake, do the 10th, because even a stop clock's right twice a day. You're gonna, at some point you're gonna, if you're backing unders for goals, at some point Liverpool will be in a game with over 3 goals. You just know they will. So but that then just kind of fuels the continuity of it, and that's another little dovetail of the fact that. Younger men, I think, feel like they're almost useless to society unless they're making money and they're flexing on Instagram in the keeping up with the Joneses kind of world. And there's a pool of riches of gambling of everyone knows a 11th cousin second removed that won a little bit on the national lottery or something like that, or everyone knows, someone that did half decent on an accumulator once. So there's that kind of, you got to be in it to win it kind of thing. Yeah. And that, again, is just another part of it that just makes it so much more dangerous.
So Matt, how did you begin the day one of 508? What's got you to where you are today?
So I was wrestling with the idea. I've known I've had a problem for a while, and I needed to stop. And there were times where I suppose you could say I lost my discipline. The parasite of gambling addiction brought me back to it. And I started to get a lot of physical symptoms. I was having a couple of panic attacks in the middle of the night. I developed a bit of a fear of going to bed. I was definitely having this day-to-day generalised anxiety, a sense of impending doom. I felt like I was going to choke on my food. And it was essentially the nervous system pushing back on what I'd put it through with just fight or flight for too long. And 509-ish days ago, I was somewhat able to leverage that of just I wouldn't wish this feeling on my arch nemesis. I just, yes, to an extent, my brain still thinks gambling's fun, but I can't feel like this. This is not right. And then started the recovery journey, did some online Gamblers Anonymous meetings, which I'd recommend for anyone watching that does struggle. Enrolled to go into Gordon Moody. And the first 90 days is the hardest because you're in a state where you've got habitual patterns of gambling. The brain is in what's known as an anhedonic headspace, which means you're just not going to experience the joy of anything else other than gambling. You could go and watch your favourite film at an IMAX cinema with your favourite people eating your favourite food. It's not going to come close to over 2.5 goals in a Premiership football match with a lump of cash on it. It's just not, because you've distorted your brain chemistry, and you need to wait for the dopamine gremlins to level out on the seesaw, for want of a better neurochemical term. But it gets easier. It does get easier as you, like anything that you try to come off of, wean yourself off of. And you do get back to more of a chemical baseline where you crave it less because you enjoy life without it more. And then that kind of, you got something to work with then. And then I suppose a combination of trying to protect my streak of a large number of days now, and the fact that I've actively been sharing online my journey since the 1st of August last year, there's a leverage to that of, certainly not wanting to go backwards back into it.
Yeah. You mentioned about being online there. You've got an Instagram page called Addicted to Growth,
yeah,
which I think is a great handle. How are you helping people, Matt, and what can people come to you for?
That was born out of me being in Tesco's car park on a Sunday morning the week before the Premier League season's kicked off, thinking if I don't start vulnerably sharing, I'm going to potentially be in trouble here with some urges and some triggers once the football season kicks off. And I just wanted to make some content of storytelling about the mind of a compulsive gambler that I've never really seen before, and I feel that would have resonated with me in my teens, 20s, 30s. Everything from trying to show people that they're not alone, to reduce the shame in gambling, to kind of explain how it works in a very sort of cerebral but kind of logical manner, which is very, very difficult to do. And I'm just trying to show people that it's something that can escalate out of control. They're not on their own. I'm not sort of bold or brave enough to say that I've kind of beaten it, but it's a little bit of inspiration of someone that's on a recovery journey sharing about it. So yeah, I'm on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube Shorts, essentially just with content of that theme, really.
And you've got some documents, haven't you, that you people can come to you for and pay for. It's kind of like headlines around some of the behaviours and so on and so forth, which I think is brilliant. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Yeah. I've put I've done a YouTube channel with some slightly longer form videos where I do interviews and things like that, and I've put a couple of little very inexpensive things to available on my profile pages of just kind of pages that I like a fully documented process that I went through to quit, all the steps that I took, the way I was feeling at the time, some external resources and things like that. And yeah, I like to try and, educate people about, because there is some help out there. Which I'll mention. There's a lot of people, for every place that's, I shouldn't say this, but trying to fleece money out of people, there are, gambling blocking apps that are working hard to stay up to date with all the software to limit people's access that they know they've got a problem. Gamban in particular is one that's free in the UK. There's a lot of other apps that will combine everything from kind of breath work to sort of centering yourself, to giving you resources at the right time, to gamifying your streak and things like that. So you've got a visual representation, which can be quite powerful to a compulsive gambler that's used to that kind of world of, the smartphone gaming side of things. And yeah, I went to Gordon Moody Rehab, which was actually a government funded rehab, so it didn't cost me anything. So for problem gamblers out there, the gambling companies have to give 1% of their profits to gambling harm related causes, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is an absolute enormous, what's the bigger word, enormous or gigantic fortune because of the profit that they do make. So there is some resources out there for whether it's counselling sessions, whether it's some retreat like rehabs, whether it's NHS linked things. So yeah, it's as difficult as it is. If you are someone that struggles, there are some olive branches out there, definitely.
And Matt, just in kind of conclusion, I guess kind of two questions. One is for someone listening, watching, that feels like they're going through this, but perhaps a little bit more importantly, for someone who suspects maybe someone they know might be going through this. Just a bit of advice, some headlines. What can they do?
So, for me, it was incredibly powerful when I admitted that I had a problem. Now, I know this is very nuanced and people will be at different stages, but when I actually truly owned and said out loud and said to everyone I knew that I have a problem with this and life becomes unmanageable when I do it, it is actually strangely liberating because it stops a lot of the wrestling with yourself about whether or not you should continue.
You're not hiding anything then, are you?
No, which is a big one because as a compulsive gambler, you often will have a lot of lies and deceit probably in your back pocket that you've done over the years. So I think there's something to be said for the acceptance of that, and there's no shame around that. That if that's you for whatever reason, you can try and go deeper into investigating as to why. But when you accept that, you can move forward. I think in terms of someone who knows someone who is struggling, it can be tricky because people will often have their defences up. And if you go in waving the finger saying you're gambling more than you should have done, that's not necessarily going to be the best way around it. I always say to people when they reach out to me, spouses, loved ones, siblings of problem gamblers, you want to kind of look for a bit of a crack in the dam. So you want to kind of say to them, well, this guy does interesting gambling content. Why don't you have a look? Rather than, I think you've got a problem. I think you're lying to me about your money. Because that's subject to the place of acceptance they're at, that could potentially just make them clam up.
Trigger even more, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, as humans, we like to think we're smart. And if we decide to quit, it's a good decision because we're smart and we decided it rather than the wife just won't stop on, about it. So it's difficult and it's delicate and it's nuanced. And I think when I really understood that I've got a problem that I want to play just to play, there's a deep understanding in that I just cannot win that. I can let the addiction bring me back by saying, be great to win 500 quid so we can win that leather jacket. Be great to win 2 grand so we can go to Sri Lanka. It doesn't exist for me because it never happens. I never crystallize the winnings because I am in it for the wrong reasons. I am in it to play, just to play. And that's going to just only cause me more misery, and life is better. And the other thing I would add is if you are someone that's in a compulsive pattern, you need something to replace it with. So for me, that's been physical exercise, which I could bore you to tears with, but something that will replace because you're going to have a lot of time on your hands and you're going to have a lot of mental bandwidth on your side, and you're going to have a lot of kind of unchanneled neurochemistry that needs to go somewhere. And if that's putting yourself out there by starting a content channel, starting a side business, saying you're going to run a marathon, set yourself a goal that keeps you engaged, because that's got a better chance of kind of stimulating you in the same way that a gambling problem
It's
would.
filling that time as well, isn't it? We've had a guy called Matt Wing who was on about sobriety, and he talked about one of the biggest things he went through when he stopped drinking was, wow, I used to do that a lot. Like I've got time on my hands now. Needed to find that thing.
Yeah.
Interestingly, went into fitness as well in that essence, but just really making sure that there was a different go-to other than I'm not doing this, I'm not that kind of playing out.
Yeah. Fitness can be a good one because often compulsive gamblers I was diagnosed ADHD. Not all ADHDers are addicts and not all addicts are neurodivergent, but there's something to be said for a busy brain, and exhausting yourself physically is a really good way to kind of, Tyson Fury talks a lot about this in terms of help with his bipolar and conditions and things like that. When you physically exhaust yourself, you haven't got as much time or space to worry about. So yeah, I think that's why a lot of recovering addicts resonate with fitness.
Yeah. Matt, thanks so much for joining us on the Graft podcast. It's
Pleasure.
Yeah, it's Graft is about hard work, and I can understand that this has been a lot of hard work for you. I'm delighted that it's 508, 509 days. We wish you all the best for
Thank you.
For the continued recovery, and the way you articulate it is very real, and I really hope that people will reach out to you if they have concerns about themselves or anybody else that they know, because I can certainly see without question how easy this is to escalate beyond belief, and I think there's so many mitigating factors that don't go in people's favours. You mentioned there very quickly about the world of the phone has probably changed it exponentially again, right? Because of that always on capability is there, and I was really glad that when you agreed to be on the podcast, because I wanted to dig into it more, because I think this is something that people can get help with, and I hope they reach out to you as well. So Matt, Cowell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
That's a wrap on this week's Graft. Please make sure you follow the podcast from wherever you listen or watch from so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.